Okay, so Tom Brady's legacy just apparently continues to grow and grow and grow. He played the entire season on a torn MCL that I guess he suffered his last season in New England, and he was never once on the injury report, which raises some eyebrows. But I mean, Tom Brady's this is just ridiculous. Like every year, there's something new. It's like I don't know. I can't even. You can't even. There's no superlative that really grasps how ridiculous he is. Right?
No, there's not. I mean, this is a shot to the TB12 method because obviously he is showing his age a little bit if he's still getting injured, because that's their whole shtick, is that you prevent injury, flexion, just mind over matter. But the biggest thing to me on this story is the impact on betting, and this league is putting out injury reports for the sanctity of that aspect of the game. And the fact that he was able to go an entire season without even being listed on the injury report is shocking and will need to change now that gambling is being legalized across the board. I mean, we already talked about in our Sky Judge conversations that the league's going to have to answer to somebody if games are now being essentially questioned the integrity of, if a bad call here or there. And I mean, the only saving grace for Tom Brady here is that they won, right? This is a Pete Rose example, right? So he bet on the game, but yeah, he was winning. He had the most hits. Why do you
Yeah.
care if he was betting on the game? Because obviously he wasn't betting to
To
throw
lose.
the game, right? And so Tom Brady, the only thing that holds him up, I mean, can you imagine what would have happened if they weren't in playoff contention?
Yeah,
This would have come out way earlier, right?
for sure. And I think in addition to that, it's just the general effect that it has on the gambling market, and and not nobody thinks Tom Brady was out here throwing games, right? That's just not who he is. Like I don't think anybody's questioning that, but it's like
He might have
if
given a
ever
couple for Breeze's legacy. I don't know. You don't know. When it started mattering, then he took it to Breeze. But here, take a
yeah,
couple of regular season games. You're probably going to get hurt. Okay, you had what, 13 broken ribs. It happens, bro. Take a
it
W,
happens.
eat a W, and I'll take care of it in the postseason.
Yeah, I but like if he was listed on the injury report every week with an MCL injury, I'm curious how that would have affected overall where the public money went. Um, again, it didn't change the outcome, but it is very interesting to think about. You're right.
Well, but this sport it's a contact sport, and you think about injuries like this in hockey, they only have to report lower body injury, upper body injury, right? Illness.
It's
And
so
so
stupid.
I mean, but at the same time, it lets them know that it's impacted, but it doesn't give a competitive advantage to the other team to know that, hey, his MCL is completely torn. Not that you can go low anymore, but throwing him around a little bit extra is not going to be something that he's going to enjoy at this point in time, versus a Tom Brady that's perfectly healthy and you're worried about getting a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty or something like that, right?
Yeah, for sure. I do want to say too, like not discrediting the injury by any means. I mean, you're talking about a ligament tear in your knee. It's significant, but as somebody that's torn both my ACLs and at one point had a clean tear, at another point had a partial tear, the clean tears are extremely more manageable,
Yeah.
especially from a pain standpoint. And it, I was able to walk off, right? Not comfortably necessarily when it happened, but I was able to walk off, and it was like in my head, I'm like, oh, I must be fine, right? It's like, nope, saw the doctor. There's nothing there, man. And I don't know, like structurally, how the MCL plays into throwing a football necessarily. We know Tom's not a scrambler. We know Tom's smart. He's going to get the ball out. He's not going to put himself in harm's way. So I I don't know. I'm a little skeptical as to like how much this injury actually mattered for him to
Yeah,
some degree.
the MCL definitely would have been one of the most manageable ligament tears for him, just because of his lack of movement in the pocket and explosive stuff. Obviously, your lateral movement will be limited with your MCL, but he's not cutting left and cutting right and trying to get past somebody. He's usually cutting left and then going down and trying to fight another day.
Yeah, for sure. Plus, I don't know, maybe I'm just like talking on my ass here, but he seems like a very like rotational thrower, like with his upper body in a way. Like he's not necessarily driving through with his hips as much or like torquing on his post leg as much as some guys do to generate power. And I don't know, maybe his style just in general has saved him here. But
But I think his style might have changed out of that as well, because he gets knocked for his quote unquote arm strength. And then you can go back and watch him in the 2011 Super Bowl, and he's freaking throwing balls 72 yards in the air as well. So he's got the power. I think that he's the type that is cerebral enough to change his game to suit what his limitations are. And quite frankly, the league should watch out next year if he's going to be not necessarily more mobile, but more intact. And then they still get their starting 22 back. Plus, I'm excited to watch Gio Bernard out of this backfield, because James White had 14 receptions in the Super Bowl, and that's exactly the shoes that they were missing last year. So league should be on notice for sure.
Yeah, they look scary. And you know what's funny is I don't think until the tail end of the regular season last year was ever thinking about them as the favorites per se. I don't know why that was. And maybe it was my own bias because, they lost to the Bears earlier in the year, but I just felt like, okay, Tampa's good, right? And then you get to the end of the year and you're like, holy shit. Like I was just looking at his numbers here. So last year he threw for over 4,600 yards and 40 touchdowns, which is his second highest total he's ever thrown in a season.
Outside
That's
the 2007 year with
yeah.
Randy Moss. Yeah.
But also, just a quick aside on that season, that year he led the league in completion percentage, yards, touchdowns. His touchdown percentage was almost 9%. Like almost 9% of his throws were a touchdown that year. Is ridiculous. His yards per attempt were 8.3, and it's like you just continue to look through all of his other seasons. The one that kind of blows my mind, maybe even more so than that, was in 2011. He threw for over 5,200 yards and 39 touchdowns, was not the league leader in either of those categories. His 8.6 yards per attempt were his highest of any season of his career, including that bananas 2007 season. And he didn't lead the league in passing or in that particular statistic that year either.
And he didn't win a Super Bowl either of those years either. Those were the 2 years that Olivia Manning took him down with her offspring. So I think that's partially what the learning lesson was last year, though, is that doesn't need to be about Brady. It's ultimately not about Brady. And I wish there were more superstars that took that page out of their book, Devin Booker, and just, put the team in the position they needed to be to win. And again, I'm excited to see what they're able to do next year, because I think it's going to be not betting on anything, not guaranteeing anything, but I think it'll be a special season to watch.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. It wasn't about Tom, and he still completed 65% of his passes for 4,600 yards and 40 touchdowns without an MCL.
And without a preseason, and there's two things that you can look at when you're talking about a quarterback and wide receivers relationship. And typically Tom Brady's been on the side of knowing exactly where his receiver is going to be, hitting that spot, trusting the receiver. It's part of the reason, N'Keal Harry probably wasn't his favorite target. But then you also have the freak of nature, like the Randy Moss, right? And he had fun with Randy Moss. Evans is on a similar, not trajectory as that, but he's a freak himself. And so once you start combining knowing where his freak's going to be and being able to hit him in stride, I think this offseason is going to be fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. So, is Tampa your favorite for going into the season?
I think they have to be. just because they returned 22 starters, and that
Yeah.
defense was absolutely locked down. Granted, the Super Bowl, the Chiefs didn't have their full offensive line, but in typical Brady style too, they weren't blowing people out. They don't typically blow people out. They do just enough to manage the game. I mean, they were one possession away from losing to the Packers the week before or 2 weeks before. So I would consider
Yeah.
them the favorite, but I'm not expecting a 2007 just record shattering performance out of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, they don't need it, right, in order to be
Exactly.
successful. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is maybe to no one's surprise, a pro Tom Brady podcast. He is fucking awesome. And if you love quarterback play, you can't really hate on the guy, I don't think, at this point. So,
Yes, it's a pro quarterback podcast,
yes.
and he
Yes.
happens to be definitely the greatest one that's out there right now, and arguably the greatest of all time, as long as he has enough fingers to keep his rings on.
Yeah. Well, if he plays a couple more seasons at this high level, we're getting into some crazy territory with him, like maybe pushing Bill Russell. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
to think about that is
yeah.
wild.
Well,
But
not to get political about it either, but um, Tom Brady was the last quarterback to visit the White House too. So he's going back to back. He'll be there again on Tuesday. So as much as there was a decline or a gap in there, Tom Brady back to back White House appearances put some asterisks on a couple of those years.
yeah, the legend grows. The legend grows.